For 10,000 years, the Emperor has been silent, his voice a ghost whisper carried through the prayers of the faithful, his body a relic entombed in gold. But when the impossible happened, when the censers of Terra's sanctum flared with readings beyond comprehension, the galaxy held its breath. Billions turned their eyes toward holy Terra, the seat of mankind's god, and in that moment, the impossible became real. Every astropath, every psyker, every warp-sensitive being across the Imperium felt it first, a pulse, like the heartbeat of a dying god suddenly thundering back to life. Vox networks overloaded, transmitting nothing but static and screams. On every hive world, shrines erupted with light. The astronomicon flared to an intensity that blinded navigators throughout the segmentum solar. And on every data slate, every channel, every whisper feed from the palace walls, one word began to spread: the Emperor is awakening. At first, no one believed it. How could they? For millennia, his body had been sustained by sacrifice, his will preserved only through the endless agony of psychers burned alive in his name. But then came the proof. Images, forbidden, impossible images of the golden throne convulsing, of machinery centuries dead sparking to sudden life, of the custods dropping to their knees in unison as a light brighter than the astronomicon poured from the sanctum imperialis. In every corner of the Imperium, reactions were divided. On Armageddon, battle-hardened guardsmen fell to their knees, chanting the Emperor's name through tears of joy. In the black ships, psychers screamed until their voices bled, feeling the psychic surge ripping through the warp like a supernova. In the high halls of Mars, the Magos Dominus trembled as sacred data screens displayed readings their logic could not contain. The Omnissiah himself had moved, and that meant the end of understanding. And then came the first deaths. Entire cathedral cities were vaporized in golden fire. The faithful, praying at altars of marble and bone, found their minds erased, not punished, not condemned, simply unmade. Across Terra, custodians and sisters of silence dropped lifeless, their golden armor clattering like the ringing of funeral bells. Billions watched from the safety of orbit, from Vox feeds smuggled through the palace veil, from the dark corners of Mechanicus data webs. Some screamed in horror, others cried in ecstasy, and every last one of them knew they were witnessing the single most terrifying miracle in human history. The Emperor, their god, their corpse lord, their eternal protector, was rising. But what came next would shatter everything. Because this was not the benevolent father of mankind they prayed for. This was something else, something raw and terrible, born of pain, betrayal, and 10,000 years of silent fury. As the first tendrils of golden light reached across Terra, cities burned, ships fell from orbit, and the astronomicon's flame twisted into something darker. And through the noise, through the cries of the dying, one voice cut through every channel, a voice that would be heard across the galaxy. He's awake, and the galaxy trembled. It began as a whisper, a faint tremor in the immaterium, too soft to be measured, too subtle to be believed. But then the pulse came again, stronger, louder, alive. Every psyker across the Imperium felt it at once, a single, impossible heartbeat that seemed to echo through reality itself. The heartbeat of a god. On holy Terra, the air itself began to hum. Vox towers overloaded. The skies above the Imperial Palace split into veins of golden lightning. From orbit, the planet looked like a dying sun, flaring with unpredictable bursts of psychic light. And throughout the galaxy, the reactions began. On Cadia's ruins, the shattered remnants of that cursed world drifting near the Eye of Terror, survivors of the 13th Black Crusade paused mid-prayer. The wind, once silent, began to carry a sound that was not a sound. The void shimmered, and for a heartbeat, even the warp storms bent away from the corpse world. "He's moving," whispered a scarred commissar, eyes wide with awe. In the distant forges of Mars, the Mechanicus screamed in binary hymnals. The Omnissiah's signal had changed. The pattern recognition codes embedded in their machine spirits were now rewriting themselves, forming new, unknown sequences. Tech priests tore off their own augment eyes to see the light not meant for flesh or metal. "He returns," they intoned, though their voices trembled with something between devotion and terror. Far out in Ultramar, Robot Gilliman froze mid-command. His transhuman senses felt the psychic tremor before the astropaths around him burst into flames. For the first time since his resurrection, the Primarch of the XIII Legion whispered a prayer he hadn't spoken since his mortal youth. "Father, what have you done?" But even Gilliman's dread paled in comparison to what unfolded within the throne room itself. Captain Malchian Vane, last of the true custodians on watch, had not moved from his post, though his armor was cracked, though blood ran down his face like liquid gold. He felt the pressure building again, each pulse stronger than the last. Around him, the corpses of tech priests twitched, their implants sparking as if answering some residual divine signal. The once silent golden throne now roared like a living engine, the air thick with ozone and psychic static. And through that chaos, Malchian felt the Emperor's mind expand, not in words, not in thoughts, but as an overwhelming presence. It spread beyond the chamber, beyond the palace, beyond Terra. Across the void, billions of souls felt it simultaneously. Some wept, others screamed, but all knew. Something ancient had awoken. Something that had waited 10,000 years to pass judgment. In the void between stars, Imperial Navy ships found their gellar fields faltering. Their navigators saw it first, the Astronomican's light no longer steady, no longer the beacon they had trusted for millennia. It twisted, reshaped itself into a golden spiral that pulsed like a heart. For a moment, all routes through the warp became one, a tunnel of living light leading back to Terra. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the path collapsed, stranding thousands of ships in blind warp space. Everywhere, across every world, reaction replaced reason. Ecclesiarchs tore off their robes, crying that prophecy had been fulfilled. Heretics fell to their knees in repentance. Rogue psychers laughed hysterically as their minds burned away in the psychic storm. On distant shrine worlds, priests proclaimed the second coming. And in the shadow depths of the warp, demons screamed, their laughter replaced with a primal, trembling fear, because the light hurt them. For the first time in 10,000 years, the ruinous powers themselves recoiled. Slaanesh's domain flickered, Khorne's rivers of blood boiled to vapor, and Tzeentch's impossible city folded in on itself as something greater than chaos itself began to move. The Emperor's awakening was not just felt, it rewrote the rules that governed the warp. And through it all, one phrase spread across every frequency, from the highest Vox networks of the Adeptus Terra to the hidden data crypts of the Inquisition. The Emperor lives, but no one understood what that truly meant. The galaxy's greatest moment of faith had arrived, and with it came the first taste of divine horror. The first sound was not a voice, nor the hum of ancient machines stirring to life. It was a fracture, a sound like the breaking of bone magnified across eternity, sharp, resonant, final. The golden throne, that ancient engine of life and death, groaned under forces no mortal eye could see. Malchian Vane felt the tremor through the soles of his boots. The obsidian floor quivered like liquid under his feet. Above him, the light of the Astronomican bled through the vaulted ceiling, refracting into spirals of molten gold. He had seen worlds burn, had heard the screams of demons dying in holy fire, but this sound, this cracking of the throne, was different. It was the sound of a god breaking his cage. The Mechanicus adepts nearest to the sanctum screamed binary prayers, their mechadendrites thrashing wildly. Thousands of years of faith and fear collapsed in a single instant as they realized the unthinkable, their sacred machine, the holiest construct in existence, was failing. Sparks erupted from its core conduits, molten cables slithered like serpents across the floor. Holy oil turned to flame. The throne's once steady hum became a monstrous roar, a song of disintegration that tore at the mind. From his position, Malchian saw the first golden fissure split the massive seat beneath the Emperor. It bled light, not illumination as mortals know it, but psychic brilliance that warped reality wherever it touched. The stone beneath his boots softened, became liquid, then hardened again, crystallized into impossible geometries that made his enhanced mind ache to perceive. And then the whispers began. They did not come from the warp, nor from any mortal throat. They came from inside the throne, from the very mechanisms that had held the Emperor for 10,000 years. Each whisper was a voice, and each voice carried a memory. Of ancient tech priests who had labored in devotion, of psychers whose souls had been consumed to feed the beacon, of countless lives sacrificed to maintain the illusion of divine stasis. Now, all those voices screamed at once. Malchian staggered, his mind filled with images: humanity's rise, the Great Crusade, the heresy, the siege. He saw the Emperor in battle against Horus, the galaxy split by betrayal and fire. He saw the golden throne built not as a monument, but as a tomb. And over all of it, he felt the Emperor's mind awakening, pushing outward, sweeping through his memories like a hurricane through dust. Outside the sanctum, chaos reigned. The custodes guarding the outer gates fell into formation by instinct, their training stronger than their fear. The air around the imperial palace was now alive with static lightning, each bolt laced with the raw power of the warp. Thousands of pilgrims, once praying beyond the walls, now burned where they stood, their faith made fuel for the psychic storm. The sky itself seemed to melt, clouds dissolving into gold vapor. Across Terra, the Inquisition's black ships launched without orders. Astropaths collapsed mid-scream. The Mechanicus attempted to contain the energy readings, but the data was meaningless. The Emperor's power was rewriting their sensors faster than they could measure it. Deep within the sanctum, Malchian watched in horror as the Emperor's withered form began to move again. The tubes that had sustained him for millennia snapped one by one, recoiling like dying serpents. Golden blood light made liquid spilled across the throne. The smell was ozone, sanctity, and burning metal. His body was no longer a corpse, it was becoming something else. Each crack in the throne sent a new pulse across Terra, each louder than the last. Every pulse was a word, though none could understand its meaning. Ships in orbit heard it through their hulls. The warp howled in answer. Then came the ninth crack, the one that silenced everything. The air vanished from the sanctum, candles extinguished, machinery halted mid-motion. The universe seemed to pause. For one terrible instant, Malchian thought time itself had ended. And in that silence, he heard the Emperor breathe. Once, just once, it was not the breath of a man. It was the inhalation of an idea, of a god reclaiming the concept of existence. The throne split open completely. A blinding column of golden light erupted upward, shattering the ceiling, piercing the palace, and tearing into the void above Terra. All across the planet, billions fell to their knees as the light bathed the world. The faithful cried that salvation had come. The wise knew better, because with every pulse of that light, more minds died, more souls burned, more reality cracked. The Emperor of mankind had awakened, and the galaxy trembled at the sound of his throne breaking. The moment came without warning, yet it had been anticipated for millennia. A single flicker, imperceptible to all but the most disciplined custodes, ran across the Emperor's desiccated visage. His skeletal fingers twitched. The light from the golden throne intensified, no longer contained by brass and obsidian, flowing outward like molten gold through every chamber, every corridor, every world. Malchian Vane, last of the true custodians, felt the weight of 10,000 years press upon his mind. He alone remained standing while the others collapsed, their enhanced physiology and mental fortitude insufficient against the raw psychic storm. Around him, the sanctum had become a cathedral of agony and ecstasy, screams of ecstasy, screams of terror, all merging into a symphony that only the Emperor could conduct. And then he opened his eyes. It was not a gaze meant for mortals, it was judgment incarnate. Two orbs of golden fire burned into Malchian's consciousness, piercing past his enhanced skull, past his thoughts, past his very soul. They catalogued him. They remembered every hesitation, every failure, every memory he had carried through his centuries of service. And yet, somehow, amidst the horror, there was a spark of recognition, a fleeting acknowledgement that he was more than a servant. He was a witness. Through those eyes, Malchian felt the Imperium itself. Every star, every world, every life across Terra, and the segmentum solar was drawn into a psychic lens of scrutiny. Entire planetary populations were judged in an instant. Some were spared, though they would never know why. Others perished before they even understood what had befallen them, minds erased, hearts stopped mid-beat, lives undone in a moment. The light from the Emperor's eyes was no mere illumination. It was a force of comprehension, of absolute knowledge. It reached beyond the physical, touching the warp itself. Demons quailed in their palaces. Entities who had thrived for millennia on the fear and suffering of mortals now found themselves under the gaze of something greater, something that had endured 10,000 years of betrayal and watched every false saint and corrupt priest twist his truth. Across Terra, billions of faithful and heretic alike were overwhelmed. The Astronomicon, once a beacon of guidance for all navigators, now blazed as a weapon. Its rays lanced through the warp, eradicating entities that had long feasted upon humanity's psychic residue. Astropaths screamed, their bodies crumbling to ash as the Emperor's will passed through them. Ships in orbit were struck by invisible tendrils of energy, tearing their hulls apart, detonating plasma reactors in silent, radiant bursts. Yet Malchian stood unbroken, even as his brothers fell around him. His enhanced mind struggled to comprehend what he witnessed. The Emperor's eyes scanned not only his immediate surroundings, but the far reaches of the galaxy, measuring, cataloging, condemning, and in rare instances, sparing. Every decision, every thought of humanity was under scrutiny. Even the custod centuries of unwavering loyalty were questioned, every memory analyzed, every moment of inaction weighed against the standard of divine perfection. And then came the voice, not spoken aloud but delivered directly into the mind of Malchian with crushing intensity, layered, infinite, multiversal. Malchian Vane, witness, witness what must follow. Witness what your kind has wrought in my absence. The words carried weight that could shatter mountains, yet they were not merely judgment, they were understanding. Every act of hubris, every corruption of truth, every perversion of faith, the Emperor catalogued it all and weighed it against the ideals he had fought to establish. Malchian's enhanced vision could see the very warp bending to the Emperor's consciousness. Streams of psychic energy radiated outward, penetrating every corner of the galaxy, touching the minds of the faithful and the heretical alike. Those with strength and purity of purpose felt awe, wonder, and terror intertwined. Those who had long perverted humanity's truth found themselves erased, their lives undone before their bodies could even falter. And Malchian knew the truth, horrifying and inescapable. This was not the Emperor they had prayed for, not the benevolent father of mankind, not the savior who would return from the golden throne to deliver the Imperium. This was judgment. Absolute, merciless, divine wrath incarnate. He was awake, and the galaxy would never be the same. The moment the Emperor fully awakened, the Imperium's perception of reality fractured. The Golden Throne, once a symbol of eternal vigilance, now radiated pure psychic power that could not be contained. The light did not merely illuminate, it consumed, reshaping the very fabric of existence wherever it reached. On Terra, entire hive cities collapsed in radiant waves, the faithful burning in awe and terror. The Astra Militarum, who had spent centuries defending humanity, found themselves helpless. Bolter fire, disciplined formations, and armored columns meant nothing against an energy that transcended physical laws. Even the most fortified bastions cracked under the weight of his gaze. Beyond Terra, the consequences were unimaginable. Planetary governors and archmagisters, far from the palace, watched as the astronomicon twisted violently, its light lancing into the warp. Ships dropped from the skies like metal rain, their plasma reactors detonating silently but lethally. Worlds accustomed to the Emperor's distant guidance now faced his immediate judgment. Entire civilizations blinked out of existence. Their crimes, their corruption, their misplaced faith, all measured and unmade. And yet, amid the destruction, there was a strange precision. The Emperor's wrath was not random. Those who had strayed into superstition, who had perverted his truth for personal gain, were obliterated. The loyal, those whose faith and devotion remained pure, were spared, though forever changed by the touch of his presence. Malchian Vane, the last of the Custodes who had maintained eternal vigil, moved amidst the devastation. His armor, infused with centuries of training and arcane augmentation, responded to the Emperor's power. He alone could stand, he alone could witness, and he alone carried the burden of understanding. Around him, the bodies of his fallen brothers shimmered briefly in the golden light before dissolving into nothingness, the weight of their sacrifice feeding the Emperor's inexhaustible might. From orbit, the Emperor's radiance pierced the void, touching colonies and fortresses across the segmentum solar. Psychers screamed and fell, navigators burned out as their third eyes gazed upon the blinding light, and astropaths crumbled mid-transmission. Even the demonic entities lurking in the warp shrieked and retreated, their centuries of predation meaningless before the awakening of their true predator. Yet amidst this cataclysm, Malchian realized the deeper truth. The Emperor did not move for destruction alone. Every step, every pulse of light, every wave of psychic power was measured. He sought to remake the Imperium, to cleanse it of corruption, ignorance, and the superstitions that had twisted humanity in his absence. Billions had been lost, yes, but a higher purpose endured. The survival of mankind in its purest, most untainted form. Malchian approached the Emperor, walking through the radiant maelstrom, feeling the heat of judgment that threatened to melt even enhanced armor. He alone could meet his gaze without immediate obliteration. The skeletal fingers of the once corpse now radiated living light, and his eyes, blazing suns of divine fury, fixed upon Malchian as though seeing not only him, but every thought, every doubt, every memory ever held by the last custodian. "Rise, Malchian Vane," the Emperor's voice resonated through the custodian's mind. "The Imperium has faltered in my absence. The corruption, the superstition, the betrayal, these must end. And you will witness, serve, and guide where the weak cannot." And Malchian understood. The galaxy had not been destroyed, it had been purified. The Emperor's awakening was the reckoning that every soul of humanity had unknowingly prayed for. The terror, the awe, the loss, they were all part of a vision far greater than any mortal comprehension. As the light spread across Terra, consuming darkness and falsehood alike, the galaxy itself seemed to bend beneath his will. Billions had fallen, but a new order was rising, forged not by mortals, but by the awakened Emperor himself. Malchian stood alone in the aftermath, witness to both annihilation and rebirth. And in that moment, he understood that the Imperium had survived, but not as it once was. It had been transformed, judged, and remade by the hand of its true master. The Emperor had risen, the galaxy had trembled, and the story of mankind had entered a new, terrifying, and glorious age. For 10,000 years, we have looked to the Emperor as a distant guardian, a symbol of hope, a deity in gold. And yet, in the wake of his awakening, we learn that hope and terror are inseparable. What we witnessed was not mere salvation, it was judgment, it was reckoning, it was the reminder that even gods carry the weight of their creation. As fans, as witnesses to this grimdark universe, we feel awe because the stakes are beyond comprehension. We feel fear because the consequences are absolute. And we feel wonder because Warhammer 40,000 teaches us that even in a galaxy of infinite darkness, there exists power, purpose, and vision beyond mortal understanding. So remember this, the stories of the Imperium are not just tales of war, they are lessons of vigilance, of courage, and of confronting the unimaginable. Let the Emperor's awakening remind us why we immerse ourselves in this universe. Because to see the impossible is to understand the scale of what it means to endure, to serve, and to survive. Thank you for witnessing this moment with us. If this shook you as it shook the galaxy, hit that like button, share your reactions below, and join us for the next chapter of Warhammer 40,000 lore. The Emperor has risen, the galaxy trembles, and we are here to tell the story.